Dr. Page, talk to us. Talk to us.
So So I do concur with everything Nyla said. She did talk about the baggage and how, we have a bag and we just keep putting stuff in it, putting stuff in it, putting stuff in it. So one analogy I always use with my clients, I'm like, you have on a backpack and you're carrying around probably about 5, 10 pound boulders. So you got about 50 pounds of weight on you right now. And it's actually
Wow.
caused by trauma. And so
Wow.
they always talk about, well, I'm just tired. I feel like I can never get enough rest. And I'm like, well, when you're walking around with that much weight on you, I'm like, that's what happens. I'm like, you begin to break down mentally,
Mm,
emotionally, and physically. So I'm like, how much longer do you think you can actually walk around carrying all of this baggage? And I'm like, at some point, guess what? It's going to weigh down on you and you're going to break. I'm like, we are people. We are made to be strong. We're made to resilient. So we can bend, but we shouldn't break. And of course,
mm,
that's where the mental illness aspect comes in because it's like you're carrying too much. Yes, it is going to break you down at some point in time if you don't take care of it. Now, I know us as African Americans, we have always been taught, that we're strong, we're resilient, we need to go no matter what. And I'm like, but y'all, we're still humans. So I'm
mm,
like, even though, yes, we are probably some of the strongest people on this earth, I mean, because I look at the things we've been through, we're still going. Um, we are still, having a hard time with that now. We're starting, to break down now from all of the stress and everything else that we have carried for years. So I do tell people you have to take care of yourself. And I'm like, you know yourself best. I mean, how you think, how you feel, how you act, your sleeping patterns, your eating habits, all of that. And I'm like, when that stuff starts to change,
mm.
excuse me, I'm like, that's your warning signs right there. You know that something's off. So I know for me, when I was in my early 20s, around about 2021, I was in college, I was in a relationship, things were going well, and then it was like overnight, things just fell apart between us. So um for about 2 weeks, I just noticed I wasn't my normal self. Like, I'm pretty,
Right.
pretty cheerful person, smiling, things like that. I wasn't as happy. I mean, it literally felt like I was in like a black hole and could not get out. So that was kind of a
Mhm.
warning sign. Like I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, my hair was falling out. I was like, yeah,
Oh,
there was
wow.
something definitely wrong because I was like, this is not me. So I was sitting in my abnormal psych class one day and we were going through the mood disorders and they have a little checklist there. So we get to depression. And as we're going down the list, like I'm checking them off, checking them off, checking them off. And I'm like, I checked 10 out of 13 things. So that was my aha moment right there, which that was the Lord saying, you are depressed. That's why you've been feeling this way. So of course it all clicked at that moment. Um,
Mm,
so like after like I got out of class, like I went and researched depression. And if there would have been a picture in the book, it would have been me right beside, depressive disorder. That would have been me because I was depressed. But I didn't notice I just was not myself. And of course I self-diagnosed myself then, but I'm like, okay. I'm like, this is horrible. Like I don't want, to feel this way. So I knew I had to, start processing that and getting rid of it. So I did a lot of, praying. I was up at night, crying, praying. So I was like, Lord, I was like, this is horrible. Like I never want
right.
to go through that again. But it was just, I mean, having the stress of losing that relationship, grieving that relationship actually. Then I
Right.
was in school, trying to finish up school. It was taking like 15 hours. I was working full time. So I had a lot going on. So for me, that was like the, wake up call that I definitely, need to take care of myself and actually go, get the help. So I do tell people what we have to do is really just take the mask off because we're good at masking stuff and
Man,
coming to
come on.
terms with that's our problem. I mean, we can walk around, we can smile, we can laugh, we can act like it's okay, but underneath it all, we know it's not okay. And it is
That's right.
okay not to be okay because we're humans. And
Mhm.
I always tell people, yes, the help is there because there are some people they're like, well, we don't have the help. And I'm like, y'all, the help is there. You just have to actually reach out. And I'm like, you have to get the help. I will say, when I look at other races, they go get the help. I mean, they're
Yes.
going to go to therapy, they're going to go to counseling, they're going to rehab, they're going to do
Hmm.
it all. But there's something that actually, and it's the stigma that stops us from going and getting the help that we need. And so we walk around with like years of baggage, and it's just weighing us down. I mean, I know
Right.
people that, you know, their brother or their sister cut their Barbie doll's hair off when they were 7. They're still mad about that. But I'm like, you
Mm.
47 now, so you've been
Oh
walking
man.
around 40 years, still
Oh wow.
mad about this. And it's like, when are you gonna let that go? And then of
Right.
course, when those 40 years that they've grown up, through adolescence and adulthood is just compounded. And so that's where, of course, we get the complex trauma from, because it's
Mm.
just over the years going through all those adverse life experiences and never coming to terms with them. Like you said, Harry, just running from it all the time. But we do have to stop at some point in time. It's okay. I got to deal with this, because if you don't
Okay.
deal with it, it's going to deal with you. And
It's
then
gonna
that's
do
what
with
we're
you.
going to see, the ugly part of it.
Mm. Man, you've heard it straight from the doctor and from my CC. These are just real life situations, real life events that we're dealing with every single day. So you could be, depending on what season of life you could be the patient, or you could be the person that's offering the help, or you could be both the people. This is just, be careful how I say this. We don't accept it, but don't think it's strange if you find yourself in it in your life. Does that make sense, ladies? Did I say that good? We don't embrace it and just say, "Hey, this is how it is." We work on it. We do everything to fix it, but then we don't freak out either when we may find ourselves in it or we see it in our lives either. Right? That's kind of, I think that's a fine line. Um, because basically, I listened to both of you both diagnose so many different seasons that I went through in my life, even seasons now. Um, but it's great to have information to help dig yourself up out of the situation, right? I when you both were talking, I thought of this particular thing, and I want both of you to address it before we go to our next portion. Um, Many times we hear this. I heard this as a kid. You know, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just a bad little kid. I want to dig into that a little bit, um, because I think of a couple of things when it comes to that. And I have to be careful too, because I'm speaking of it from a generation and a time where they didn't have access. Technology wasn't where it is now. So it was limited to a degree. Even if you're talking just having the insurance to be able to go and do these type of things, it was totally different. And I'm talking some over 45 years ago. But when you look at the landscape of that now, that phrase still happens. But now we know we have so much access, so much other tools to help us identify and work on things. But when you hear that term, and you two both, even myself, know the kid is he's not, he or she is not a bad kid. They have some other things going on. Talk to us about that. How can we help parents or guardians or whoever have children? Because let's go from the faith perspective. We already know life and death is in the power of our tongue. Whatever we speak is going to manifest. So if I've been entrusted with this child, even though my eyes may be betraying me, I'm still gonna say, no, no, no. Little Johnny is blessed, and little Johnny is well behaved. Little Johnny is obedient. Little Johnny, little Sally, she's very obedient. Those things we have to say. Those things. I don't want to have this without. But just speaking from a natural perspective, how do we delve into it as it relates to mental health and trauma? Dr. Page.
So when it comes to children, one thing we need to look at is, have they had any adverse childhood experiences, which we call ACEs?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically that's going to be traumatic events, and it's going to happen for children 0 to 17. So that's going to be
Okay.
the neglect, it's going to be the abuse, it's going to be the violence. So we do have to actually look at those things, because they are going to affect children when it comes to children, because they usually don't have that mental, or emotional capacity to be
Right.
able to verbalize, their feelings. So, their anger, their frustration, irritation, whatever it is. A lot of times, children are going to act it out. And of course, I worked with children, and I'll get parents, and they're just like, my child is bad. And I'm like, well, one, don't call your child bad. Say your child is doing, some, bad things, but don't call your child bad, because I'm like, as soon as you put that out there, then yes, your child's gonna be like, I'm bad and I'm gonna act bad. So, is that you think I'm doing? So, I will actually, ask them, what is your child seeing? What have they experienced? What's going on in the home? What's going on in school? What's going on in the neighborhood? Typically, I'm going to look at those three environments to see if I can make some connections there. Because even though you can have a child in the home and maybe everything's fine in the home, you don't know what's going on at school. Then at school, of course, we got bullying going on, we got fighting going on, you got school shootings going on. So these kids are dealing with a lot, even when they walk outside the home,
Yeah.
even just in their neighborhoods. I've
Yeah.
worked in juvenile justice system, and the majority of the boys I had there growing up in neighborhoods where there's a lot of violence, there's a shooting, the fighting, there's a lot of abuse. So I mean, they're seeing this from the day that they are born. And so what's happening, of course, is they are not taught how to properly cope with stress. So it's like, oh,
Mhm.
you go fight, you go handle it in the street, whatever it is, right? Which these days they're not fighting, they're just shooting.
That's
Um,
it.
so basically, we got to look at the adverse childhood experiences, what's happening to them. And then I will have some parents, they'll say, well, I'm gonna just beat it out of them. I'm like, you're not going to beat it out of them. It doesn't work that way. Um, So I will actually tell them, get your child some therapy, get them some counseling, just so your child can learn those coping skills because they got to learn how to cope. I mean, we're going to go
Yeah.
through stuff. It's not going to stop. So, the coping skills, getting some anger management skills in there, how to handle their emotions is like sometimes you got to walk away. It's probably the best thing to do in some situations, but just knowing how to calm themselves down, when they are getting angry. So knowing how to de-escalate.
Mhm.
And then also just giving them some social skills. So sometimes, I mean, I see children like they have no social skills. I mean,
None
I will ask
whatsoever.
children, what's your name? They're like, Lil Roo. And I'm like, who is Lil Roo? I'm like, that is not your name. I need a legal name, the one that's on your birth certificate.
Oh
They're
my
like, well, I
God.
don't go by that name. And I'm like, listen, you have to know how to, introduce yourself. So just, social skills, introducing themselves,
Right.
just saying yes ma'am, no ma'am. I get kids are like yeah, no, and of course I didn't grow up that way, but I'm like, it goes a long way if you say please,
It
thank you,
does.
yes ma'am, no ma'am.
Yes.
So just teaching them the social skills, how to express their emotions instead of
Yes.
suppressing it
Yes.
and holding it in. Now the girls, they're great at that. They're gonna cry and read all that, but typically when it comes to the boys, when it comes to the
Oh my
males,
God.
y'all are taught, you got to be masculine, you got to
I
hold
know,
it
right?
in. And I'm like, okay, we need to get
Yeah.
out of that
Right.
because it's not helping. So just teaching them how to, express those emotions. So I think for when it comes to children, teaching them the coping skills at a young age. And my nieces and nephews, at their school, their elementary school, and they actually, I think, yeah, elementary school. So they started in like kindergarten. So they have what they call their emotions ring. And so they have a little ring, little flip cards on it. And so whenever they're sad, like they don't want to talk about it, they can just say, oh, I'm sad. But they are taught to like identify their emotions and talk about it. And of course, that's SEL, the social emotional learning. So they're learning, those coping skills in some of those schools. They're doing a lot of that, but then you still
Yeah.
get, the kids like they miss out on that. So I do, tell parents, do family therapy, do family counseling. I do actually parent training.
Yeah.
With a lot of my families, they'll come to that. And so I'm working with the parent and the child because a lot of times I've got adult parents, they don't have coping skills. So they're over here
Right.
doing stuff and punching holes in the wall and doing everything else. And then they're like, well, I don't know why my child is like that. But I'm like, look how you handle your anger. So your child
That's
has
it.
learned that from you. And so I'm like, you've passed it down. And now you're wondering, well, I don't know why they do that. It's because you do. So
Mhm.
we have to sit down and we have to work through all of that. But just treating the parent and the child, because a lot of times that child is responding based on usually what's going on in the home or maybe what's going on at school or in their neighborhood.
Mm. Naila, go ahead. Y'all know I want to touch everything, but I'm not. Go ahead,
I
Naila.
know you, you can touch it.
No, 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 no. I'm not.
um,
I'm not.
Dr. Page mentioned the ACEs. In most instances, parents who take the ACE assessment, they realize that they have experienced a lot of trauma as well.
That's
And
right.
so, as mentioned, if the parent has experienced trauma, you're typically teaching your child the
Hmm.
traumatic way that you respond to things. So you're teaching your
Hmm.
children your traumatic response as opposed to
Hmm.
teaching them how to effectively cope. When you
Wow.
think about therapy, I really believe play therapy is so helpful for children. So when you
Okay.
have kids, typically between ages of like 4 and 10 or 4 to 8, when they're able to have a counselor and if they have a play therapist, children's natural form of communication is play. So when
Hmm.
a child is in a play therapy room, they're able to play out and communicate to you in ways that you would never imagine, right? So
Mm.
they can go in there, they can play it out. Typically when parents are divorced, like I know in the playroom that we had, it was two houses. So when parents are divorced, they have a house where they can kind of show what's going on with mom and show what's going on with dad. I know when I was in school in clinical, what they did was one kid, his dad liked to cook. So he would come and play therapy and he would cook the whole time because
Mm.
that's what his dad did. And his dad was a musician. So he liked to pretend and emulate like he was playing instruments. So children communicate very deep in play therapy, what's going on with them. And they'll talk about it sometimes, but typically they play it out, right? And that's a safe place. It's
Mm.
non-threatening. It's not somebody asking them a million questions. And it's
Right.
someone actually spending time with them and tracking their behaviors. And like Dr. Page
Mm.
mentioned, she trains the parents. There's child-parent relationship training where you teach a parent how to play with the child and how to be
Man.
present in that moment. Because a lot of times parents don't know how to do that. Kids are like, hey, can you come do a tea party? I'll do that later. I gotta cook. But
Right.
a tea party, baby, a parent can get so much information from a child and learn so much if they just go sit down at that tea party. So in child
Mm.
parent relationship training, typically, if there's a play therapist your child is working with, hopefully they've gone through a program that teaches them how to do that. But it teaches them how to interact and engage with the child during play, what they should do and what they should not do to ensure the child is comfortable.
Yeah.
And so it's not threatening, because when you negatively impact a child during play, you're coming into their world and you're
Hmm.
messing with how they play and their experiences. But that's the best way for a parent to be able to learn how to engage most effectively. um, but I think that's about it. I really want to push that because I know if I'd had played therapy as a child, I tell you, I'd already have my player haters degree. I'd
Mm.
already be president of something. You know what I'm saying? But when you don't
Right.
have an outlet or a way to address the trauma as a
Yeah.
child, you take those issues from childhood into adulthood, and
Yeah.
you're continuously trying to figure things out, and you're not going to be able to do it effectively.
Yeah. Wow. That's ladies. Man, you hit it. I mean, you nail it every time. So parents, listen, hear me right here. I know the first time of me hearing what I just heard from Dr. Stacy and from our CC Naila, it was tough to swallow. Because almost like Stacy talked earlier when she was in her class and she was checking the boxes for depression. She checked like 11, 12 boxes of it. And it's like, it's no denying that I am straight up depressed. But as a parent, when you sit there and you're checking all these boxes, you can see like the reason they acting that way is because of the way I act. It's tough. So I want to comfort you right now. You cannot give what you do not have. I know what grandmama told us, what a mama told us, but it's impossible to. You have no frame of reference. You don't even know what it looks like. And so when you look at Stacy, again, Dr. Page talked earlier about generations. We talk about all of the traumatic things that were passed down. There were also things for everyday living that was not passed down, and rightfully so, because you got generations of people who are fighting and surviving, fighting and surviving. And all of us on here, we know how to do what? Fight and survive, fight and survive, fight and survive. And that's a good thing. But there comes a point and there comes a time where we have to stop, drop and roll, and stop, dropping and roll is getting some new information and learning. And I'm telling you, it is hurtful. You have to identify. It is hard to look in the mirror and it's like the issue is you. You, Harry Hickerson, you, yeah, you the one. It's tough. I want you to know on today, if you make up in your mind that you want to change it, whatever help, do better. I promise you, we are a team that's committed to help you, walk you through it. And you don't have to hang your head. You don't have to feel sad. If you cry, cry this time, but you prophesy to the tissue, say, this is my last time I'm crying over this. Why? Because I'm gonna do everything that I can to be better at this so they can be better at that. Right. So I want to say that to you first. And then if your parents are still alive, let them off the hook. Let them go. They couldn't give it to you. They didn't know. Why are they in their late life where they should be enjoying and they still having to apologize? They're still having to say, I'm sorry. They're still having to beg for you. Let it go. Forgive. You have the information now. Forgive. Let it go. Let's walk the journey together. In our families, there is so much already that we have to contend with. Let's take all the unnecessary stuff out that we're having to contend with and put that stuff away once and for all. Let's now I do understand the forgetting process. You may never forget what happened. That's a whole nother podcast. But I'm telling you, if you're willing to forgive, is the first step in the healing. And as you go through the healing, I'm telling you, there is a way for you to forget. If God said He can take your sin and put it in the sea of forgiveness, the sea, and you don't remember it anymore, surely that we can do the same thing. But it takes work, right? I had to, if I'm gonna do mental health and trauma podcast with these ladies, I have to be on have to be honest and vulnerable. Do you know how many times my toes been stepped on since this our third year doing this? I'm like, man, but you know what? I embrace it. That's why I want to be better at it. I want to get, and I know it takes us, it's levels, it's seasons to it. So I wanted to say that because that is, I think it's an issue that we see and we hear so much. And yeah, if you look at some of what's playing out, I guarantee you some of them they've been told that when they were young, male and females alike, right? So that's good stuff, ladies. That's real good stuff. And our parents, man, I want you to know, man, if whatever your yesterday was, let it be yesterday. Let's start a new today and make a new tomorrow. So that's good stuff, ladies. I think I want to go here. I think I want to go here. I don't know where I want. I do know where I want to go. Well, do I know where I want? I do know where I want to go. Okay, so I want to talk about our title when I say my mind playing tricks on us. I'm gonna ask you guys a question, then I'm gonna make a statement, then I want you guys to answer the statement. So, Dr. Page, when you hear me say, let me give a little clarity too. When I was thinking about doing this, I was trying to think of something catchy because I wanted people to watch it. And so I was like, man, I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't think of any title. And sure enough, one day I'm going to go see my buddy. I walk into the convenience store and what's playing in the background? My mind playing tricks on it. Dun, 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 dun. I say, there it is right there. That classic song we all know. And if you listen to that song, they let you know why their mind was playing tricks on them. So it's a play on words, but we do know that our mind does play tricks on us. We do know that. So when you hear that, the title, what comes to mind, Dr. Page?
So when I hear that title, my mind is playing tricks on me. So what comes to mind for me is people not, of course, taking care of their issues. So having, the anxiety, the depression, and never gets treated. And then that is where, like, they start, hallucinating, hearing, seeing things that aren't there. You got the paranoia and all that comes along with it. And so I know deep down inside, people are like, repressing that stuff. And of course, it's going to come up at some point. And so what's happening is, even though, yeah, they're functioning, whatever, and able to go through, and of course, to them, they're functioning well, so they're like, I'm functioning, I'm okay. But then to us, we're looking at it, we're like, no, you're living in total dysfunction. And so for me, my mind is playing tricks on me. It's just basically being in dysfunction and actually thinking that you are living an okay life and you're really not. Now, of course, the person, that's living in dysfunction, not functioning like, we would expect them to, they think
Mhm.
everything is fine, they think everything is going great, and really it's not. And of course, we're on the outside looking in, and we're looking at, the things they're talking about, we're looking at the things that they're doing, and we're like, okay, that's not making any sense to us. Why are they doing
Mhm.
that? So
Mhm.
of course, to them, it's making perfect sense, though. So, of course, I work with population where, I do mental health and substance abuse. And so I will have a lot of my clients, they'll be like, man, I was saying this, I was saying that, I did this, I did that. And they were like, my mom was playing tricks on me. And I'm like, it was in more ways than one.
Right.
Because, of course,
Right.
they're under the influence. And then, of course, when they're having the negative thoughts, when the paranoia sets in, instead of them going and getting the help, it's like, I'm gonna just, go over here and, roll it up. I'm gonna light it up. I'm gonna smoke it up. I'm gonna drink it up. That's
Mhm.
them. And I'm like, that just adds another layer to it. And I'm like, yeah, your mind will be playing tricks on you then. You're gonna hear things and see
Absolutely.
things that are not there that are not real. So for me, when I hear that, that's what I think about.
That's good. Naila, CC, Naila,
For
CC.
me, it's more like your perception is your reality.
Okay.
So what you perceive is true to you is true to you. What you perceive is real to you is real to you. Everyone's perception is different.
Hmm.
So what I think about one thing here, you may not see it the same way.
Right.
Stacy as well. So in some instances, it can cause you to make you feel like your mind is playing tricks on you. I
Right.
can speak from personal experience when I was in a situation and Stacy brought up depression, right? And being depressed. And me thinking back to the fact that a lot of times it can be generational
Hmm.
depression. Um, you hear your parents talk about things from the past and the things that they've
Yep.
experienced
Yep.
and how it happened on this side of the family, that side of the family. And you're like, okay, so has this really happened to me too? Like, is this why I'm going through this kind of thing? Or is this why these
Right.
things keep happening? And it makes you look at things differently. But how we perceive things now is not how people perceive things in the past,
Right.
right? And
Right.
like you mentioned, when you add other components to it, I've seen people who have been struggling with different things. I'm not going. I was about to say it out loud, but we're talking about that in the next segment.
Right.
When people are struggling with different things and they try to use maladaptive coping mechanisms, which are things you shouldn't do. Bad coping, like she mentioned, the alcohol, the drugs, and things like that, which does lead to paranoia. I know most people think marijuana is the best thing since sliced bread, but it increases your anxiety. I'm just saying, it increases your anxiety. It's clinically
Right.
proven. So
Right.
it makes you paranoid. It does cause your mind to play tricks on you. So when you think you're living in a reality and you think everything is going okay, you're carrying all your baggage and your luggage. You're not getting the help you need. You're not communicating that you need help to your support system. Sometimes one thing can just tip you off the edge. And you're
Right.
like, is this really happening to me?
Hmm.
Is this really my life? I've said it out loud before. And it
Right.
causes you to sit down and think about what you need to do differently if you want to make a change.
Mm. Man, you ladies, boy, I can't get nothing around y'all. Y'all be on point. So I'm gonna make the statement now. So when I was in the store that day, the song came on. Okay, I immediately got the title. I said, okay, I know I want to talk this, and I'm gonna try to cover that. But I've never. This will be the first year that I've ever said this way, and I think we should. I don't know how we'll address it, or maybe in the next episode or something. But when I think about my mind playing tricks on me, I think of it from this perspective: is when my mind sees something, and my mind tells me that I can't be it or have it. Case in point, um, I may see someone live in a particular neighborhood. The trick is you'll never be able to live in the neighborhood. Or you'll see somebody, a couple that's thriving. Your mind, your marriage will never thrive like that. You see people sending their kids off to college. Your mind, you'll never be able to send your kids to college. You see people just experiencing life in a healthy manner. Your mind tells you your body will never, you'll never experience it. When I think of my mind playing tricks on us, when I look at a society, when I look at the social media, the internet addiction of believing things that our mind has engulfed over and over and over and over and over and over. That's what I think about when I say my mind is playing tricks on you. A lot of people minds play tricks on them just from thumb surfing, mind tricks, mind Jedi mind tricks. I wish I won't. I wish I won't. I wish I won't. But when I look at God's will, nothing in there says anything about I wish and I won't. He said that it is. And it is so. That he spoke, let there be light. And it was what? The lights came on. Right. So I think as we're talking about these things, it's so important. As I said before, if you want to be whole, you have to understand the whole story. So I know in the other segments, I'm going to delve more into the faith side of things, because if you really want to experience it too, and be whole, you need to understand the faith portion of it, so you can have it. I don't want to just get it and experience it for 1 quarter. No, I want a lifetime of it. And so I think those things play into that. So when I listen to you guys talk, man, oh, excuse me. When I listen to you guys talk and like that, I'm like, man, um, much love, much shout out to anybody that's in the clinical field, doctors, therapists, whatever you do to help people with their mental health, man. Man, thank God for you. It takes special, what I decree, what I think are special individuals to be able to do that, right? And I think as I laugh, I'm saying this out loud. My kids are gonna laugh when they see this. My wife is gonna even laugh. I think um, when I think about raising kids, I'm like, man, that's about as mental as I can go. I think after my pay grade, I can't go any higher than that. Because, man, I know they are definitely laughing at me as their therapist, as a father. It's like, man, this dude is bugging out. But I understand the pressures of life. Like raising kids is probably it's the hardest thing other than being married. Those two are the hardest things that I've ever done in my life. Now, let me say this too. They are also the most rewarding things that I have ever done in my life. But I will tell you, they are hard. And man, y'all understand this from our generation. My mama say, boy, you gonna make me lose my mind. She would put her whole hand on her head and say, boy, you gonna make me lose my mind. So for me, when she would make that statement, I knew I needed to go somewhere, be very quiet, be very still, and get out of sight. Because it meant the next thing was going to be, I'm gonna bring some harm to your body. Right. So now, parents, I'm not telling you to do that. This is my story, right? This is my story, right? This is my story. I'm helping you to see how does this mental thing look? And then somebody listening, I get it. You might not even understand what we're talking about. We all may be from different walks and have different experiences. But I think if you look at the foundation and you look at the outcome, doesn't matter what your situation is, you can still see the fruit of it. So, ladies, um, I think what I want to do now is we talked about some specific things that we want to cover. And I'm going to go to our CC first. And what I want you to do now is I want you to pick one, right? The audience doesn't know. We know because we talked about it. I want you to pick one, and I want you each to do one. I don't want you to do the same one. I want each of you to do one, and I want to delve into it because I'll pretend now that, okay, I have this session with you, right? And so let's say for pretend, I, don't, I won't say how I necessarily go, but let's just say you ask me to email you some information. So when I get there, you have a basis to start and how we're going to delve in, or whatever's the questionnaire, whatever it is. So you got my questionnaire, Naila, you got the information. I'm there. Let's pick up the conversation now on what you want to talk about, right? Because we need to talk about this, Harry. When I looked at what you said, right, we need to talk about it. This is something new that I'm doing, but I have the right guest on to do it with. So I'm
I
ready.
got so many. You said
That's all
you're
right.
ready.
I'm ready. No, I'm ready. I'm ready. I already went to the bathroom. I'm ready. I ain't got to get up. I'm gonna be here for ready. Let's go. I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm doing this for a reason. And after we do it, you'll be like, okay, I see why you did it. Go ahead. I'm ready.
I would say grief from the trauma of mental health.
There we go. Let's jump in. Let's talk about
So,
that grief.
so when you're experiencing grief,
Hmm.
it's not always death. It's not always a physical death.
Okay.
When you're grieving something, you're grieving something that once was that you no longer have, or an
Okay.
experience that you had. So grief from mental health, like for instance, I spoke about my husband. I
Hmm.
had to grieve the person that he was before. I had to grieve
Mm,
the man that I married because he's no longer that person. I
mm,
had to grieve the relationship that I had because I no longer have that relationship. I had to grieve the woman that I was then because I've evolved into a different woman,
mm.
right? So
Okay.
when it comes to grief with mental health, a lot of times you have to grieve the things that once were in order to be able to step into your purpose and destiny that's set forth for you to move forward.
Mm,
So it's in acknowledging this is what it was, this is what I had, I don't have that anymore. That's not ever going to be. That was my story then, that's the past. I have to forgive whatever I have to forgive, whoever I have to forgive for myself in those moments. So I have to forgive the people who judged, the people who criticized, the people who ridiculed. I have to grieve all those things to move forward and be able to be prosperous, right? And not hold on to it. And I think a lot of times people think forgiveness is for the people that you forgive. The forgiveness is for yourself.
yeah.
We forgive for ourselves. So
Mm,
you have to grieve the mindset that you once had. And struggling with anxiety and depression at different moments of my life and having panic attacks and things like that. I have to forgive whatever caused that. I have to forgive the situation.
mm.
And I have to forgive myself and show self-compassion, right?
Self
Because
compassion.
self-compassion is something that a lot of times we don't show. I have to stop
Mm,
and be like, it's okay, baby girl, you got it. You can move forward. This happened. It wasn't your fault, but you can
mm,
progress. You
mm,
walk into your destiny. So
mm.
I have to grieve what once was in order to step and walk into the purpose of what I once had. And we have to do that every day with things that we have to let go of.
Mm. Ooh. All right. I'm leaving your office. I'm getting ready to go to Dr. Page's office. Wow. That's heavy, man. We coming back to that. That's heavy. That's good. It's heavy, but it's good. Okay, Dr. Page, you got my question there. I'm sorry for the grape jelly. I had a PB&J before I sent it to you.
Oh,
I'm sorry it smelled like peanut butter.
like that is perfectly fine. So one topic I do want to talk about briefly is substance abuse.
Mm.
Now I could probably talk about substance abuse for days and still not come to an end. So I'm gonna do a little glimpse, a little
No, I
snapshot.
want you. I want you guys to talk. No, that's why we're
So
on here. We want to talk. I want you to
um,
talk.
so no, right now we are definitely in a substance abuse crisis.
Yes.
So pandemic, we were not expecting that in 2020. We were not expecting to be in it that long.
Okay.
So that actually, triggered a lot of people actually relapse as far, with substances. People said they were doing fine, and the pandemic hit. Everything gets shut down. Our world was turned upside down. We had to live according to a new normal, figure out some new things. So
Right.
a lot of people, just relapse into their addiction, and even some people, it started their addiction. So when it comes to trauma, we do see a lot of people self-medicating. So because they
Yeah.
haven't dealt with their traumatic experiences, they are self-medicating. So instead of going to the doctor and getting, maybe medication for the anxiety and depression, instead of getting the counseling, they're like, well, I'll just drink, I will use drugs. So I'll smoke marijuana, I'll smoke meth, I'll use heroin, whatever their drug of choice is.
Hmm.
um, so we've seen actually, the rise in addictions, especially over the last few years since 2020. And of course, I work with clients that have both mental health and substance abuse issues. And the
Okay.
majority of my clients, their issues actually started in childhood. So they had a lot of those ACEs, so the abuse, the neglect, seeing the violence, even being victims of it themselves. And so what they did was, instead of course, going to get the treatment, they said, well, I'll use drugs. And so the majority of them, it started with alcohol. And I mean, most of them, by the time they were like 11 or 12, they were already drinking. And so that's typically where it started. So that was kind of their gateway. Then by the time they hit their teens, they were smoking, using marijuana. And then, of course, it just, bloomed from there. And of course, alcohol at one point, it wasn't enough. They built their tolerance to that. Then it was the marijuana, built their tolerance to that. And most of them, by the time they hit 16, 17 years old, then it's the heavy drugs.
Got it.
It's the methamphetamines, it's the heroin. Even now, it's the fentanyl. So we're having a whole opioid crisis, which people are
Right.
dying left and right from that. I know here in North Texas area, and I'm pretty sure it's in other areas too. I mean, we had like 3 or 4 kids in one week. Now, this is just Monday through Thursday that overdosed on fentanyl at school.
That's
So
crazy. Man.
passing out, in the classroom, there was actually one death. One of those students did actually pass away. They did, catch the people, excuse me, that sold them the drugs. So when it comes to trauma, a lot of people do self-medicate because they just feel like if I drink, if I smoke, if I, inhale, snort, shoot up, whatever their means, abuse is, it's going to help the problem. But I always tell my clients, when the alcohol wears off, when the drug wears off, you're right back where you started. So you're
Yeah.
still facing that problem. And I'm like, I don't care how high that you get. One, you're never going to get back to that original high. When your brain cells, were still fresh and hadn't been affected by any drugs. I'm like, you're never going to get back to that. That's why you're using more. So we do have to learn those good coping skills so that we are not out there self-medicating. And of course, once you start self-medicating, it's like that's your crutch. That's what you're going to go to.
Mm.
Then you have this whole vicious cycle of addiction. I have clients where I'll have them maybe for 60, 90 days, and then 30 days later, they're right back because they
Mm.
relapse. And so a
Mm.
lot of them, they haven't been taught to have those, good coping skills. They only know to pick up the bottle. They only know to smoke, or shoot up, and they think, oh, that's going to help me when it's really not. They're just doing more
Yeah.
harm to themselves. So yeah, we're
Yeah.
having a challenging time right now because there are a lot of people using substances and it just seems to be getting worse.
Man. Yeah. Okay. So when you find yourself having to deal with, if it's you yourself or someone that you love with the substance abuse, or if it's yourself or someone you love and you find yourself having to deal with grief, you've just been given information. And obviously, it's great when you get information, right? It is. It feels very empowering. I feel really good. But we know the most critical step is taking it and doing the implementation of it.